A food chain is just a diagram. Represents how energy in food molecules flow from one organism to the next. You can start to see on the bottom left, the little fish gets eaten by the bigger fish, gets eaten by the biggest fish. So down on the bottom right, there's a pretty interesting information about how decomposers and dead things factor into the food chains. But I'll let you watch that one on your own rather than inside of this video. I like this diagram here. I would actually really love for you to draw this diagram. Now, if you're like, I don't know how to draw an owl, that's fine. You could just like literally write the word owl there. But I want you to write out, or at least draw out like the symbols here. So we start out with the grass on the bottom left. Now the grass is packed full of energy, right? That energy is going to go to the grasshopper to the right. Notice the direction of the arrow. The arrow is pointing to the right because that is where the energy is going to. So you might be saying, well, where does the energy originally come from? If you remember, that comes from the sun, right? Because it is a producer on the bottom left there with the grass. So producer produces its own energy, gets it from the sun originally. Sunlight in the form of food, it goes to the grass. Grass goes to the grasshopper. Grasshopper goes to the rodent. Rodent goes towards the owl. And that's how the energy flows through the food chain. Now, this is a really interesting video right here that just talks about some of my favorite creatures, which are some of the extinct, what's called megafauna. There are these gigantic animals that used to exist before. Well, they're all extinct now for the most part, but there were just so many big ones, and like what happened to them, and how food chains can get impacted over time. Really interesting video. I'd love for you to watch. Then I'd like for you to write down this definition, which is a food web. So whereas a food chain is very simple, you're just isolating one part of really what the larger part is, which is the food web. It's a complex diagram representing the many energy pathways in a real ecosystem. So in theory, all of these animals right here are all part of the same ecosystem. And of course, the bobcat, right on the top right, is eating 4 different things that are all going up towards it. The mountain lion is eating 5 different things, all energy going towards it. Nothing is eating these things on the top, right? So there's nothing that goes up there. Whereas everything is getting indirectly, the energy is all coming from down here. So these plants nourish everything else, which nourishes everything else above it. So if you look at the different levels of consumers, on the bottom, you see the producers and decomposers. They're producing their own food or breaking down or recycling. Then the primary consumers are the first level. Those are always herbivores. So they're always getting their food from right below. Then you have the secondary consumers. Secondary consumers are oftentimes carnivores or omnivores. So sometimes they eat these creatures that are primary consumers. Sometimes they eat both the primary consumers and some of the producers. It depends. And generally, at the top, you have the tertiary consumers. So if secondary is second, tertiary generally means third level. And they are almost always carnivores, but some of them can be omnivores as well, like us. Like we would be at the top of pretty much any food chain eventually. We don't eat coyote or mountain lion or bobcat. Generally, we don't eat too many of the secondary consumer level things, but we might eat rabbit, so that's possible. Some people do at least. So again, if you don't mind trying to draw something like this, you don't need to draw all the levels, but if you see right here, even if you just try to show the example, just visually, this will help. So if you have grass and you write the word grass, you write the word seeds here, and then you just write the word like shrub, and then you show how these things go in multiple different directions. That's what I'm looking for you to show here, right? And how these complex organisms go all over the place here. This is another short video that I think is very interesting, just about we have to make a decision because animals are going extinct all the time, and we need to say, well, how many of these animals can we save and what's the smartest way? I think this is a fascinating video that helps explore this, so please check it out. And then this is the last definition that I'm going to have you write down today, which is energy pyramid. It's a diagram shaped like a triangle, right? Shaped like a pyramid. I'd like for you to draw a pyramid to kind of show what it looks like. And you could just like write the things that are inside of it, but it shows the loss of energy at each level of the food chain. So the reason that we have at the bottom of the food chain is this grass right here. The reason it's that, so in a pyramid, the bottom level is the widest, it's the biggest. It must be that way because it's supporting everything that's on top of it. So everything on top of it must then be smaller than the one before. There has to be less of these, I'm going to call them meerkats, I think they are. There has to be less of these meerkats than there are of the grass. Because if there were more meerkats, they would all need to eat. They would eat up all the grass, and then all the grass would be gone, and then all the meerkats would starve. So there has to be more grass to support the amount of meerkats there. And then there has to be less wolves at the top of there. Because if there's too many wolves, there won't be enough meerkats for them, and again, they'll starve.